All right. So thanks a lot for having us. My name is Wim Gabriels. I'm project and policy coordinator at ESN International, the Erasmus Student Network. We are present in 40 countries, more than 500 local organizations. And I'll be talking a little bit today about our initiative called SocialErasmus and a project that we had called SocialErasmus Plus that focuses on community engagement and volunteering for students on exchange. So one of the things that we've seen in some of our research is that actually students predominantly always indicate that they meet much less locals than they initially expected to do, which means that there is a bit of a discrepancy of them actually meeting the local community, which we believe should be one of the prime goals of actually exchange programs and internationalization at large. When we look at the different barriers on why this is the case, they also feel that it has a lot to do with not having enough opportunities to actually engage with the local community or with another group of people. So together, we believe that that means that we need to do more active engagement in order to make sure that this happens more. And with that in mind, we actually started the SocialErasmus Plus project to push for this a bit more. And this was an Erasmus Plus project focusing on improving the integration of international students into local communities through volunteer activities for students on exchange. We started with SocialErasmus in 2009, but we wanted to make it more professional and make it more integrated within the Erasmus program as well. So we had a specific.
Wim, can I just ask? Wim, sorry, a technicality. You have the presenters mode. You should change to the full screen mode, please.
Okay.
Sorry, it's usually in PowerPoint the very left one on the bottom, which shows the full screen image.
Is it now better?
Yes, that is how it should be. Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks. Sorry. Sorry for that. So yes, I was just saying that we wanted to do this to improve the integration of exchange students, having them better understand local values. And we also wanted to make sure that the implementation process of volunteer activities is more closely connected to the education and youth sector, ensuring impact happens on all levels and increase the learning experience of students. So to connect this with a more official and education framework. Well, I'll talk about this a little bit more next. So we connect this officially in the theoretical framework to the third mission of universities. I think this is very much in tune with what your conference has been about in the past couple of days even. We want to connect the volunteering aspect given to students to the third mission of universities, allowing for internationalization of education, to connect with internationalization at home, and to improve the integration and transcultural competences that is built by the students as well as the local community, and connect these to the learning objectives in the third mission for social responsibility of higher education institutions. Next to that, we also want to make sure that we bridge non-formal learning methods more closely to higher education with more formal recognition in students' degrees. And this is something where we connect more strongly with community service learning, which we found to be one of the most emerging educational frameworks to really engage with community service or community engagement into the curriculum, allowing students to have academic credit for the learning that derives from this. So this is one of the things that we saw at the end of our project, that if we want to do this, we want to kind of connect volunteering opportunities and community engagement to activities of community service learning or international service learning, to allow students to also get academic credit for this. We did some impact assessment, or at least we looked at the competences that students declared that they gained throughout their experience. And here were some of the results that were given by the students. So many of them said that they felt they had a better intercultural understanding, in transcultural competences were improved. They felt a much bigger active role of society. So active citizenship was an important aspect of it, and also their Erasmus spirit and their connection to the European identity was also increased. I'm going to show you a little bit one of the examples that was implemented throughout the project to kind of illustrate what was happening. So one of our local organizations worked together with the University of the Franche-Comté in Besançon, where the Center of Applied Linguistics that focuses on the French language and intercultural awareness set up a course of volunteering where the students volunteered for 25 hours at full time. But of course, there's preparation sessions involved, there's intakes and debriefings and evaluations, which would end up to a course of, I think, about 3 ECTS credits at the end of the day that was offered to a student. It was an elective course, so students didn't have to take it, but they would get 3 ECTS credits and a diploma supplement connected to that. And the students would engage in different types of volunteering activities, because the university felt that by doing this, their language level, by practicing on a day-to-day basis their French language level, they could improve their language skills in an effective way. How it worked was that the university had an academic responsible that was actually actively doing the testing and the evaluation, while the local organization, in true community service and community engagement way, was working together with the university to actually set up these type of volunteer activities. And this was funded by a local project by the region of Lorraine in France, where they were organizing this. All of this kind of framework was summarized in an educational framework that we published in 2019 on our website SocialErasmus.org. So you can also have a look and see a bit more information about that presentation there if you're interested. And I also wanted to show you a little bit at the end of the project what the actual achievements and impacts were. So we had more than 1,200 social Erasmus activities, so volunteering activities, out of which 260 were school visits. So in local local high schools or primary schools. In total, there were 86,000 people involved, including 2,000 of our volunteers and 18,000 international students. So there is quite a big group of people that were involved in this process. And we also noted in our surveys why students took part in this type of activities. And as one of the key elements, which was interesting for us, or at least pleasant to see, that one of the reasons, the major reason to actually take part, was that they wanted to interact more with the local community and to actually contribute to the local community as an Erasmus student and to increase their intercultural understanding. So a lot of the objectives that we were set out to experience were actually met by them being able to volunteer in exchange. We set out, connected to that, quite a big campaign in order to motivate students to take part in these type of activities that we shared across our network, and we also included a charter that students could sign to push them to volunteer. And here you have quite a few of the different messages. I also invite you to have a look at our website, because it has it has several videos that can actually showcase what has happened on the ground. In total, we reached quite a lot of people with our communication as well, which led to SocialErasmus to be mentioned inside the new ECHE for the Erasmus Charter for Higher Education. Makes reference to the project twice in order to make sure that students and universities are aware of the fact that we want students to engage more with local communities, and that community engagement is quite important. Now, I would like to finish my contribution to talk a little bit on what we are now doing to continue the work on this. So we just started last year a follow-up project that follows in the footprints of SocialErasmus Plus, and that focuses on social inclusion and engagement in mobility. That really focuses not necessarily on the Erasmus in schools factor, but focuses on trying to reach more disadvantaged youth, so that we can bring also international students in contact with local communities, often of underrepresented groups, in order to actually increase the intercultural exchange and visibility of international student mobility to those groups as well. Because we believe that internationalization should be accessible for everybody. And that's why we believe that we want to reach out to more young people that are underrepresented in education, underrepresented in internationalization at large, in order to widen participation as well, and to just have the Erasmus program be more inclusive. For that matter, we work more on increasing integration of international students in the local community by stimulating intercultural dialogue. So, because we believe, and as was also pointed out before, is that we really think it's important that students feel that they belong in a certain community by taking part in society. Having an active role in society allows you to feel part of society. So that's one of the things that we feel is quite important, and this is being continued in our work within this project, making sure that volunteering and SocialErasmus stays actively on the topic. We've developed a portal specifically for that. It's called right now activities.esn.org, because it's in piloting phase. And this is a print screen, but if you want, you can always have a look at that, where we are trying to do a larger impact assessment of what is happening by collecting data from our local organizations and international students as well, by surveying them after an activity on how they've experienced their activities, collecting all of that information and hopefully improving as we go on. The framework given by given to and by students within the next Erasmus Plus program. Then I think I'm almost actually at the end of my slides. So were there any questions, or there's anything that people would like me to elaborate on? I'll be happy to.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Wim. So we know now the procedure. It's always the same. It always takes a little bit of time till the presenter, the participants start to pose questions. So I usually start with some of mine. Maybe could you go back to your presentation to the SocialErasmus side on the international service learning? because I would like to discuss that a bit, because that was also a question that came up in the session before.
Is this slide, does it work for you?
Let me have a look. Yeah, that is fine. Because I think what this is this is back in a certain way to one of the core aspects that we all think about when it's about internationalization, the students, right? But this time with a different perspective. It's not about making them other people maybe more interested in mobility or something, but here it is about getting the students a better understanding of the community they moved into when they decided to go abroad, right? So for me, what I would like to ask, do you have some experiences from the surveys you do, but also maybe from I don't know, the groups you meet, the employees you meet? What are the typical things that students are surprised to struggle with, or that the communities are surprised to struggle with when they do these kind of engagements? Because I think it's always, for me, I learn always the best from my own mistakes, right? From the things that don't work. So it might be interesting also to see what is difficult when you do these activities. Language could be one thing, but maybe also something else.
Yeah, language is definitely one of the things that gets mentioned quite often, and that you see is sometimes a barrier. People really like to work with children predominantly, and then of course you have this the issue with language that makes it sometimes difficult to overcome a language barrier. But I think people also really tend to like this kind of this kind of struggle with trying out different things. And there are two things that come to mind. One thing is that we really learned is that very often having an organization such as ESN being local at the same time as international, being able to connect the two. Because it's very difficult as an international student to just start engaging with the local community. You need someone who instigates and helps you to do this. So you need someone to actually set up a certain framework to actually do this. A lot of people want to volunteer and want to actively engage, but like I said, the opportunities are actually the lack of opportunities are actually one of the things that holds people back. So if we go out there with the universities, with the local student organizations, and we actually give them opportunities to do so, that's where I think opportunities really get taken and people actually actively engage. And then of course there are some technical funny elements that sometimes that we come across, such as the student, like universities or professors or teachers going like, okay, so you're going to take care of my kids for an hour, let me go and make like correct coursework. You do whatever you want with the kids. And we're like, no, you still stay, like responsible for the children, so like we kind of have to like always make sure that the rights of students don't get broken as well.
Now I forgot to unmute myself. That is exactly one of the points that I find always interesting, the things that you would not expect to happen. There are some questions now coming in. One is from Rio Pribadi, and he says, or she says, I think it's he, in the social project engagement, do you also record the response from the local communities, and how was the response? The second part of the question, I think you already dealt with. It's about barriers other than language that the student often encounters. So maybe you could focus on the first part. So do you record the response also from the communities, and what are the major responses you get?
Yeah, so within our SocialErasmus project, we didn't, unfortunately, have the structures in place to collect input from local communities. And one of the things, and I think that's where our second project kind of came in, is that it was actually in the beginning, we struggled quite a lot within SocialErasmus to kind of, okay, how are we going to measure impact? How are we going to double check everything is okay, right? So, and this is where like quite a big investment in the second project comes in when it comes to impact measurement. So there, we are creating this type of, well, we call it a student survey, but actually it is possible to collect answers and inputs from all three different types of target audience. Coordinators that are organizing activities, through local participants to students themselves. So our idea is to kind of, throughout the next implementation, which unfortunately was halted quite a bit right now through COVID, right? Because if there's one thing that gets axed really quickly is having different groups of different generations and different, so schools with universities. People try to like split everything very clearly now, making sure that there's less interaction happening. So that's one of the things that we're really picking up now and kind of trying to really engage in better understanding how people have experienced it. So far, we've done it through doing interviews with the people on the ground. And what we see is that there is actually, sometimes it's very difficult. So we did a lot of piloting as well. Sometimes it's difficult to find schools to kind of be like, okay, do you want to host a student? And the moment that you have one group of students passing by, they always tend to want more students afterwards. Especially because one of the things that we started doing also quite a lot more is we try to tailor the content more connect to the learning objectives as well. So adding things around environmental sustainability, adding things around rights or youth rights, democracy, intercultural learning, by providing better content that also really builds the interaction with the local.
Excellent. The next question comes from Alicia Betts from the Universitat de Girona and formerly ACUP, the network of Catalan universities. And she says, thank you for the presentation. I would like to share this initiative with my university. Would there be any tip on how to begin? What basic infrastructure you need to set up? And also, how did you deal with language barriers?
Well, how did we deal with language barriers? What we usually did is we always try to make sure that there's locals involved. So that's where the ESN volunteers come in. And I actually know that, so Girona, if I'm not mistaken, is in Spain. And one of our most active countries in the field is actually ESN Spain. So I can bring you in touch with the national level of ESN Spain, and they've been doing quite a lot of different projects related to this as well. Connecting with the local organizations is always quite important because we tend to, for example, overcome barriers in languages by having someone that speaks the local language at least also present in the classroom to build this bridge. And then usually once the connection is made, it becomes a game, it becomes an activity where it's less of a problem. And then when it comes to really, depending on if you want to really embed it in curricula, which is of course something that we would really like, is a good practice from one of our project partners is they started off an internal group of professors who want to embed service learning inside their courses. And they have a peer learning community where together they kind of follow up on this. So it became really strategic priority for them as a university to really build this inside their curriculums. And so they basically created a call within the university saying, look, who is interested in doing this within the curricula? And then kind of build it throughout this. So I think that would also be very interesting to kind of engage with local, with your professors and be, okay, if this is strategic priority, how can we engage you to get to the final part?
Thank you very much, Wim. And interestingly, the next question, somehow and your answer most likely, will link in a certain way, and I might explain that to the next session. And it's about sustainability, actually. And Lotte van der Gaar is asking, is there an option for the students to remain in contact or engage with the community after they go back to their home universities? For example, online volunteership, a good question in COVID times, right? Or do the contacts end after the course ends? If I might add, the typical problem of EU projects, the moment the funding ends, the project ends. So the question is, do they remain in contact after going back? Is there an online opportunity to get engaged by as an example, or does it all end when it ends?
Well, it is a two-way, it is a very layered question, because it all depends very often on the amount of time spent together, right? So how in depth the connection is. So we have different types of experience. We have students that go and volunteer for a full semester and that really get in touch with a class. Of course, there are still some elements of course, they take on a teacher slash educator's role. So sometimes, or a youth volunteer at least. So it's difficult to always keep connected with, for example, local school students or higher education students at the later stage, right? But it's the longer we see, the longer a project is implemented. So if we create frameworks that take, for example, 10 classes or a whole semester, we see that there is a stronger connection that stays more permanently than if you would do, it is possible to do this once or twice, and then the student volunteers only once or twice. It's a nice experience, but not as permanently impactful, right? The impressions are impactful, but the connections maybe don't always stay that much. When it comes to the online part, we've seen that, for example, in the Czech Republic, there have actually been online and virtual class visits, for example, engagement in local classes. So there is follow-up and there is continuation of doing this type of different volunteering activities. Yeah.
The last question I would have, if you had, the wish wand, and you could just say, like Harry Potter, you just say the words and something happens. What would it be that you would wish for in terms of this social Erasmus? What should happen if you had, all the choices in the world and you could, Wim can make it happen on a whim, so to speak? What would it be?
Then I would have it that in every exchange, a particular part of mobility would be going to this type of courses. So it would be embedded in curricula so that students get challenge-based, community-based activities inside their curricula, inside their exchange, to always kind of push them to go and do activities with the local communities. Because I think it's very possible to do this in different fields, going from medicine and doing community-based activities in medical centers to classrooms to forests. You can do this in many different ways. So my wish would be that this would be anchored in learning agreements and in in curricula across Europe. That would be the ideal scenario.
Thank you very much, and you will hopefully understand in a second why I asked the question, because I had a hope that something like this will come up. One never knows, of course. It's about the systemization, and it's about the moving from the individual activity to a structural approach. So thank you very much, Wim.